Hi Ulf, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, my name is Ulf Johansson and I'm head of news at Swedish Television. Is that okay? Is that enough? Do you want to know some more?
Yes, your background?
Well, I'm originally an educated journalist. I've worked as reporter and I've been mostly editor-in-chief in some different newspapers in Sweden before I ended up in the Swedish Television 2 years ago as head of news or editor-in-chief for news.
And what are the tasks for the main tasks you work with?
I'm responsible for all the news shows, the bulletin and the in-depth shows in Swedish Television, and also the moving towards new platforms, I mean the websites and mobiles and things like that. So that is mostly what I do.
Excellent. Would you like to begin?
Okay. So I would like to know, for example, how is elected the board of directors in the SVT, the Swedish Public Television?
Well, it's very special, the public service, because it is of course connected to the state, but they are very cautious not to be depended by the government or the parliament and things like that. So that is why they have is it foundation the right name that is firstly appointed, and then they appoint the board of directors for the
Okay,
public service.
so we can state that the election of the member of the board of directors is independent.
Yeah, I think that you could argue about that, because of course the public service compared to the private companies, there is only the owners that are appointing the. Here, it's in some way connected to the state and the parliament, but they are also, I would say, very cautious to see that there are independent people sitting in the board of the public service.
Okay, so you are saying that politics care that the people that are in the board of directors are independent from them.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. And what about the election of the president and the general director of the board of directors?
Well, the general director is appointed by the board, so and that shows that it's a really independent organization, I would say, because right now the general director is she's called Eva Hamilton, and she's originally a journalist working for the public service, and then she has moved up and been I think she was head of news, the same I am now. Okay. in something, and then she became the general director.
Okay. How is the public television funded?
Well, it's funded by what we call a license. So all people in Sweden who has a TV set, and today actually who has a computer, since we are broadcasting it on the website as well, they have to pay the license. And the license is financing both the TV and the radio in Sweden, the public service in that. So that I think it costs somewhere around 2,000 Swedish crowns a year for a family, and then that became. I think that Swedish Television has about. Let's see now, so that I give you the right numbers. Somewhere around 400 million euros, and the radio has somewhere around 300 million euros per year to work with.
In Italy, that is more or less around 2 billion euros per year. Yeah.
What did I say? Yeah, 400 million. Yeah, 400 million. That must be correct, because it's like 4 billion Swedish crowns.
Okay.
That we. I think that is about 400 or a bit more than 400 million euros.
And so you are funded only by the license television fee, or you receive money also from the advertisement?
No, in Sweden actually we don't have any commercial things in public. That is the usual way in Europe, that the public service companies also have commercial money. I mean, in Sweden there is a very small amount of money. If you are talking about big sport events, you could have I think that is about, for Swedish television, we have about equivalent to 4 million euros into sponsoring very big sport events.
Yeah.
But that is we don't have any commercials or things like that in public service.
Yes, it will be interesting to know why you don't have such kind of income from the...
Because I think that is, maybe the politicians should answer that, but I think it's two main reasons. One reason is that public service with the license money should not compete on commercial money from the commercial companies, because they don't have any money from the beginning in a license. They only can depend on the commercial income. So the one thing is that public service should not compete on that market on that income, because it should be only for the commercial companies. The other thing is that there is an idea that public service should really be independent and should not be dependent on commercial money from other companies, because then the audience could say, now they are doing this to please this company to get more money.
Exactly.
So that's the idea, to be really independent.
Now a question related to the transparency. For example, I would like to know about if all the information about the costs and the revenues are public. No, for example, the gross salary of the top manager, of all the staff level are public known, and also if all the cost of each program is public known.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that we have all the salaries public known, but on the other hand, I know that it is public known because, for example, the general director has already had in different interviews and things like that told what the salary is for her, for example, because the salary for her is much less than the top management on a commercial company. They usually have much higher salaries than in public service. Public service is not that high salaries, but there's a lot of people wanting to work there anyway. So that is, and all the things about the company you can find in our bookings, and so I don't know if you can go down to a specific program in public, but it's nothing secret about it. There's nothing secret about it.
Okay. And what about the curricula of the president, of the general director, and all the people that work there?
The curricula, what's that mean?
CV.
The CV? Yeah, that is, of course, she's very well known in Sweden, so everyone knows what she has been doing actually. But all these things are public, because we also, I mean, if you're working in all the public companies in Sweden, have to do everything according to the, if you're, example, making deals with companies, you can't do it. You have to do it openly, and everyone must know what kind of an offer did you give to get that. So you have to. Everything is very open if you're working in a public company in Sweden. Okay,
good. And for example, concerning the private television channels that are broadcasting on the national territory, can a private entity be the major stakeholder of this? For example, there is a limit on the amount of stocks ownership.
In a private
sector.
No, I mean, the biggest commercial company is TV4 in Sweden, and it's a big majority for the biggest media company in Sweden, who is owning TV4. So it's not a problem to be a major shareholder in a company like that. The things that are discussed and there could be limits is that one media company could not dominating the entire media market, because if they are biggest one in TV and in newspapers and then the government. But I would say that Sweden has not that strict rules, as in Norway, for example. Norway, the Schibsted is a very big private company, and when Schibsted was buying new newspapers, the government said, now you're moving and being too big, so you must sell something. So
Okay.
in Norway, it's more strict rules. There have been a lot of discussions in Sweden. We should be more strict in how much could a private company own of the media market.
Yeah, okay.
But there has not been changes so far.
Okay.
And there is, I would say, the public service is regarded as one very important competitor to the big private companies. I mean, public service is supposed to be something that is on the other side compared to the private companies.
Yes, it should be also in Italy like this, but you know that there is Berlusconi, and it happens also that he he put his member in the board of directory of the public television in such a manner that the public television lost audience, and the television of Berlusconi earned a lot of money.
Lui dice testualmente: l'unica concreta e importante azione possibile a breve è quella di un accordo con la RAI, cioè col gruppo
Che genere di
concorrente.
accordo? Fammi capire.
L'accordo di un disarmo bilaterale finalizzato a concordare gli ascolti di RAI e di Fininvest, perché ciascuno si attestasse su un 45% di share. Significa che la RAI avrebbe dovuto peggiorare la sua programmazione per far scendere gli ascolti e consentire alla Fininvest di salire fino a raggiungere entrambi lo stesso share. Così Fininvest avrebbe risparmiato un sacco di soldi. La cosa salta anche perché Berlusconi nello stesso periodo ha ormai pronto il suo partito, e quindi con il partito pronto è inutile mettersi a trattare con qualcuno che di lì a poco non ci sarà più. Lui una delle prime cose che farà dopo aver vinto le elezioni del marzo 94 ed essere andato al governo a maggio del 94 sarà a luglio, proprio lo stesso giorno del decreto Biondi, l'occupazione della RAI con Letizia Moratti che diventa presidente. Se non gli riuscirà l'accordo con la RAI è soltanto perché il suo governo sparisce grazie a Bossi nel giro di 8 mesi.
A quel punto passano gli anni e nel 2001 Berlusconi torna a Palazzo Chigi, questa volta però per restarci.
Torna a Palazzo Chigi, ci resta e stavolta fa le cose sul serio, però il piano è sempre quello del 93. Nel frattempo il centrosinistra ha lavorato per lui. Violante si vanterà di avere garantito a Berlusconi: non ti tocchiamo le televisioni.
Ci avete accusato di regime nonostante, ripeto, non avessimo fatto il conflitto di interessi, avessimo dichiarato eleggibile Berlusconi nonostante le concessioni, non avessimo aumentato durante il centrosinistra il fatturato di Mediaset, è aumentato di 25 volte.
Quindi che cosa succede? Appena torna al governo, agli inizi del 2002, arrivano i suoi scudieri, Antonio Baldassarre alla presidenza, Agostino Saccà alla direzione generale, e immediatamente eseguono l'editto bulgaro, cancellando dalla programmazione il fatto di Enzo Biagi e Sciuscià di Michele Santoro. Luttazzi era già stato cancellato precedentemente. Tra il 2002 e il 2003 la gestione Saccà riesce a portare la RAI, che era al 47,6%, al 43,6%. Mediaset, che era al 43%, sale al 46,4%, il che significa che si invertono le parti.
I famosi 4 punti.
Esatto. Poi arriva Cattaneo e arrivano, diciamo, a pareggiare 44,6 contro 44,9 di Fininvest. E il risultato però è che si concretizza esattamente quell'accordo di cartello, quel duopolio collusivo che praticamente ha desertificato il libero mercato, cioè non c'è più concorrenza.
Yeah, that is really a different situation than in Sweden, since he was also in the political side. Then he could not only own private companies, he could also interfering in the public service.
Yeah.
So that I would say that could never happen in Sweden.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yes, and that is what we want to avoid also in Italy.
Yeah, there's a very big difference if that is what you were talking about earlier. The government or someone else could never interfere in who is going to be the news editor or the head of news or things like that. That is only for the general director. And but I think that in Italy and also in some other, Hungary, for example, they have moved in and said we want to change the news editor who is head of the news in Italy, and that that kind of political involvement in the company could never happen in Sweden.
Yeah, okay, this is the most important point for me. You said that you are the head of the news. So how do you scale the television news and the priority that you give to them?
How do I scale?
Schedule.
Schedule.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we have some boundaries that we have. Not boundaries, but we do have some thing that we have an in-depth news show, for example, with a certain that the aim is to really do the biggest stories in more in-depth and have guests in the studio and give it more time for the audience that is more interested in the big questions or in society. And then we have the shorter ones that is more bulletin that should deliver the news so that everyone living here get the most important news during the day. So we try to actually presenting news as if you are very interested in it, you could have in-depth stories. If you are more interested in just knowing what is happening today, you have shorter ones. What we are trying to do now is, when I'm talking about the new platforms, is that a lot of young people, they don't watch news in TV at all.
Yeah.
So you have to, and we have the obligation to really try to be good for the young people in Sweden as well, and give them the things that they need to know or should know, or about society.
Yeah.
So we are working very hard in presenting news in new ways, in new platforms, and trying to reach the young people as well.
Good. And also, what is the mission of a journalist?
I think that differs if you are talking about individual journalists. Some journalists, some people has become journalists because they really actually think that I'm here to change the world or to do something really big. I think most of the journalists are driven by the passion of telling people important stories, and also maybe revealing corruption or things like that. So I think that is the two most important things, and that is also what is driving the public service, I would say. We need to tell the most important stories for the people and trying to show what's happening with people around here concerning different political decisions and what's happening when we change that, and also revealing what at least risks of corruption or risks of misuse of public money or things like that.
Yes, good. Because, for example, in Italy, the grand part of journalists try to hide the news related to the corruption of politicians. And they, for example, just hide this news, or they try to focus the attention on a more marginal aspect. For example, instead of talking of corruption, they tend to talk about, they focus a lot on murders. Okay, it is right to talk about it, but they spend a lot of time, more than 1 year, to talking about this. And also, instead of to talk about the economical crisis, they talk about Christmas shopping, or if you prefer to have holidays in the mountains or in the sea, or if you prefer to eat the ice cream cup or the ice cream cone. So
But I would say,
of course, there are exceptions, but the grand part.
But I can see what you are talking about, and I think that there's a risk right now that you can see, even in Sweden, a commercialization of news. I mean, the big commercial companies see what is people really interested in. Well, they're interested in big stars and famous people and murders and headlines, and so they are driving towards that kind of stories. And we have a lot of discussions in public service. We should also interest as many people as possible, and we need to do stories that they are interested in, but we should not move into the commercial way of presenting news. And right now, all the private companies in Sweden in the media, they are really under pressure economically because it's down. You don't have a very good economy. The internet has done all the newspapers vulnerable for competition and things like that. So I'm a bit worried that you will see worse journalism in Sweden as well because of the economic situation. You have fewer journalists, they have to tell the stories very quickly because they don't have the resources. But in public service, we don't have very much money from private companies, of course, but we have a very stable economy, so we don't have to cut down and cut down and cut down. And that, I think, is important.
It's important. Okay, so SVT is a public service. What is the meaning of public service for you?
I think the most important thing is partly what I said earlier, is that we should really be an independent news organization in a very commercial world, because all the other companies are working in commercial conditions, and they have to face the commercial things, and they need the income from commercials. But public service never ever have to consider doing things like that. So I think the most important role is to be an independent media organization in a very commercial world.
And also from politics.
Yeah, politics, of course. So that is why there have been discussions about the financing of public service in Sweden now, because now they are deciding on the next 6 years for public service. Should we tax finance public service instead of license finance it? And there could be some good ideas by tax financing. I mean, you don't have it's less bureaucracy and things like that. But the argument against that solution is that you are connecting more closely to the politicians who are deciding about taxes each year. If you have license, that is something that you can't change like that. So it's a way of being independent of political decisions. So you're right. It's very important that we are independent from the politicians.
Okay. And what are the things that a journalist should absolutely never do?
The journalist, I think that there are different things, but one thing is that you should never ever be open for that you can buy yourself into the journalism. I mean, if someone says, if you're going to write this, I will give you this and this. Okay. That is corruption among journalists, I would say, and so that is one thing you should never do. Another thing is that is more, it's not that obvious, but it's very important for journalists, I would say, not to be involved in any organizations or other companies, or to be more dependent on organizations outside your own media organization, because then it's not that someone is buying their way in, but that you could be biased to for example, if you are involved in a movement who is running certain questions, then you can engage yourself and doing journalism in their questions. So I think these are things that is very important for us as individual journalists.
Okay. So the last questions. What do you think about the Italian journalism?
I'm I'm not really an expert in Italian journalism. I've been down there professionally sometimes, and I've been visiting some newspapers when I was editor-in-chief for Swedish newspapers.
Which one, for example?
I was at that was a Rome one, a small one, Il Messaggero.
Okay, yeah.
Just on the it was at a square,
Yeah.
very close to Via del Corso, I think. Yeah. So and we were down there visiting the Swedish press attaché as well in Rome, discussing the situation in Sweden. And as I recall it, at that time, there are newspapers that is not for the broad public, but it's more for people who is very interested in following politics and things like that. I think Il Messaggero, for example, had a very low circulation, 50,000, 100,000.
Yeah, it's not so big. But
And it was one other in Rome as well. Was it that called? That is a bit bigger. Repubblica. But isn't it a big difference in Italy and Sweden? That in Sweden, at least historically, most people had a newspaper, but in Rome, or in Italy, it's more seldom that you read a newspaper that is into politics and things like that. You read, for example, maybe the sports newspapers or.
No, I read politics.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
But I mean, people in general.
People in general in Italy, you're right. They read a lot about sport news and all these kind of things. Yeah.
So. Probably there should be a lot of good journalists in Italy, I'm sure, but I think that the situation is much different from Sweden. It's even a more commercial media situation in Italy. Would you say that?
This one, but also, for example, there are journalists that are close to the right side, and so they tell the truth only against the left side. And also the opposite. There are journalists that are close to the left side and then tell the truth only against the right side. And this is not journalist for me.
No.
Because they are not independent. And the grand part of the newspaper are like this.
I can agree on that. I mean, in public service in Sweden, we are all often getting criticized from both the right side, if you're talking, and the left side. It should be like this, and then you know that probably we are not favoring any one of them, but it's very important now when we are going into an election year. We are going to measure whatever we do in politics to make sure that we balance the different parties, and we really have to stand up and say, look here, we did 10% about Swedish Democrats, and we did 40% about the Social Democrats, and we did 30%. I mean, not it doesn't have to be just as much as the size of the party, but it has to be a balance that is.
Yes, concerning to this fact, for example, I don't have here now the table, but we saw a table of the public television about the time they spend talking about the several parties. And for example, they dedicate a lot of times for talking about the PD, that is the left side party, and the PDL, that is the right side party. But they spend really around 3% of the time talking about the 5-star movement, and at the last election we had 25% like left side and right side. So they are hiding.
Unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any message you would like to give to Italian people as a journalist or as a Swedish who knows something about Italy?
Yeah, the thing I would like to say is that Italy is a very important country in Europe, and what's happening in Italy, I would say, influences us and all the people in Europe. So I really hope that the situation for journalists is going to be good, or maybe better. I'm not an expert, but really good, so that the journalists in Italy can make a good job in covering what's happening and also keeping up a good way of freedom of speeches and democracy in the country, because I think that is the history of Italy and the importance of Italy makes it very important that is a good development in Italy, I would say.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Really, we appreciate every single word you said.